Alrighty. Oh, there's like a big black bar across the top. Fix that. A little warm in here. Check, check. Mic check 1, 2. Ugh. My new great book set. Very happy about. The first reading from the new books. New to me, anyway. 73 years old. Gonna read about medicine, which I was surprised to see was a topic. Something I've studied a little bit myself. Books like this, Dead Doctors Don't Lie, Epigenetics. Oh, I'm missing one. Where's Let's Play Doctor? I have Let's Play Herbal Doctor. This one right here. Surprised to see it was its own idea in the great ideas. Oops. Okay. I need to get one of those podcast mic arms. Globe's working. Alright. Let's give this a shot. Medicine, medicine, medicine. How many pages is it? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 6. This is my reading limit. Going to turn it down. Medicine is the name of an art, of a science or group of sciences, and of a learned profession whose members are proficient in the sciences and experienced in the practice of the art. By derivation, it is also the name for curative drugs, physics, or other remedies prescribed by the physician. The archaic usage of the English word physic as the name for the art, practice, and profession of what is now generally called medicine suggests that the word's Greek root signifies, namely, that the physician, no less than the physicist, is a student of nature. There is one other historic use of medicine, which indicates its scope and connections in the Western tradition. When medieval institutions first shaped the university, the basic divisions of learning then embodied in its structure reflected different uses of learning as well as differences in subject matter. The three faculties of medicine, law, and theology not only disciplined their students in different branches of knowledge, but also trained them for distinct applications of knowledge to practice. The faculty of medicine represented all the natural sciences, especially those which have come to be called biological sciences. Just as the faculty of law or jurisprudence represented all the moral sciences and their later offshoots, now called social sciences. The doctor of medicine was concerned with knowledge bearing on the relation of man to nature, as the doctor of laws was concerned with knowledge bearing on the relation of man to man, and the doctor of theology with knowledge bearing on the relation of man to God. It is a curious accident that the word doctor, which in origin signified the competence to teach others who might practice in each of these great fields of learning, has come in popular usage to designate not the teacher, but the practitioner, and chiefly the practitioner in only one of the learned professions. Medicine may not deserve the implied emphasis upon the learning of its practitioners, but there would be some truth in granting it the distinction of being the oldest of the professions, in the sense that it comprises a group of men who not only share a common training in the relevant sciences and arts, but who also have adopted a code of practice and obligated themselves to perform a service to their fellow men. The Hippocratic Oath, sworn to in the name of Apollo, the physician, and Aesculapius, and health, and all the gods and goddesses, is the first explicit formulation of a professional ideal, and the collection of writings attributed to Hippocrates. The law explicitly indicates, as the oath implies, that there are intellectual as well as moral conditions to be fulfilled by those who would dedicate themselves to the service of health. Only those who have satisfied all requisites for the study of medicine and by diligent application have acquired a true knowledge of it shall be esteemed physicians, not only in name but in reality. The same high conception of medicine appears in the Bible. We read in Ecclesiasticus, "Honor the physician for the need thou hast of him, for the Most High hath created him. For all healing is from God, and he shall receive gifts of the King. The skill of the physician shall lift up his head, and in the sight of great men he shall be praised. The Most High hath created medicines out of the earth, and a wise man will not abhor them. The virtue of these things is come to the knowledge of men, and the Most High hath given knowledge to men, that he may be honored in his wonders. By these he shall cure, and shall allay their pains, and of these the apothecary shall make sweet confections, and shall make up ointments of health." And of his works there shall be no end, for the peace of God is all over the face of the earth. It's like the first time they quoted the Bible in these introductions. Five of the authors of the great books, Hippocrates, Galen, Gilbert, Harvey, and Freud, belonged to the profession of medicine. They were major figures in its history, practitioners of its arts. They were also contributors to the sciences concerned with health and disease. 3 others combined medicine with other pursuits. Copernicus studied medicine at Padua and devoted considerable time to its practice. Locke was Lord Shaftesbury's personal physician. James took a medical degree at Harvard after years spent in the biological sciences. Still another, Rabelais, not only studied and practiced medicine, but also edited the aphorisms of Hippocrates and Galen's little treatise on the medical art. His knowledge of medicine and his observation of its contemporary practices can be readily discerned in his comic exaggerations of anatomical and physiological detail, and of regimens of diet or exercise. The discussion of medicine in the great books is not limited to its professors or practitioners. Montaigne has many doubts about medical diagnosis and the possibility of charting the causes of disease or the remedies which cure. The patient's ignorance permits the physician to claim credit for his success and to blame fortune for his failures. Montaigne characteristically delights in observing that the doctors disagree. He offers as, quote, one example of the ancient controversy in physics the following. Herophilus lodges the original cause of all disease in the humours. Erasistratus in the blood of the arteries. Asclepiades in the invisible atoms of the pores. Alcmaeon in the exuberance of defect of our bodily strength. Diocles in the inequality of the elements of which the body is composed, and in the quality of the air we breathe. Strato in the abundance, crudity, and corruption of the nourishment we take. And Hippocrates lodges it in the spirits. There is no great danger, he adds, in our mistaking the height of the sun, or the fraction of some astronomical computation. But here, where our whole being is concerned, 'tis not wisdom to abandon ourselves to the mercy of the agitation of so many contrary winds. The agitation of contrary winds. Such commentary as this bears more on the history of medicine than on the abiding problems of its science or art, which, from Hippocrates to Freud, has been more generally agreed upon than the theories proposed for their solution. Of similar historical significance are the passages in the great works of history which describe the phenomena of disease as they appeared to contemporary observers, the plagues which ravaged Athens, Rome, and London, or the maladies which afflicted eminent individuals. Poetry, as well as history and biography, contributes to this record. The novels of Tolstoy and Fielding, the plays of Shakespeare, the tales of Cervantes and Chaucer, the Greek tragedies, and the Homeric epics furnish evidence of both the constant and the changing elements in the conception of disease. the vocation of medicine and the social acceptance of the physician. The history of medicine is an epitome of the history of the natural sciences. The researches of the Hippocratic school initiate specific methods of empirical investigation, such as the systematic collection and comparison of observations, and the painstaking record of individual case histories. The fundamental concepts fundamental concepts of medical theory reflect the philosophy of nature and of man. Conflicting notions of the causes of disease focus major issues in biology, such as the controversy in which Galen engages with Asclepiades and Erasistratus in the defense of what he supposes to be Hippocrates' and Aristotle's organic view of nature against mechanism and atomism. Mechanism and atomism. Medicine, moreover, provides some of the clearest examples of the interdependence of theory and practice. For the rules of the healing art put theories to work and to the test, and as the rules are refined or altered by the accumulated experience of particular cases, inductive insight leads to new theoretical generalizations. As the work of Dr. Harvey illustrates, biological science is both the source and the reflection of medical knowledge. Medicine also affords Bacon and Descartes the prime example of a useful application of the knowledge gained by the new methods they propose. More than engineering or the invention of mechanical utilities, medicine represents for them knowledge in the service of mankind. That science shall bear fruit in technology, quote, is not merely to be desired, writes Descartes, with a view to the invention of an infinity of arts and crafts, but principally because it brings about the preservation of health, which is without doubt the chief blessing and the foundation of all other blessings in this life. It is true that the medicine which is now in vogue contains little of which the utility is remarkable. But, without any intention of decrying it, I am sure that there is no one, even among those who make its study a profession, who does not confess that all that men know is almost nothing in comparison with what remains to be known. The subsequent history of medicine, some of the great documents of which are cited in the list of additional readings under the names of Jenner, Bichat, Virchow, Claude Bernard, and Koch, seem to substantiate Descartes' prophecy, but it also seems to be true that the major problems of medical practice are not greatly altered or diminished by the tremendous increase in our knowledge of the causes of specific diseases and our vast store of well-tested remedies. What sort of art medicine is, to what extent the physician should let nature run its course, with what restraint or prudence the physician should apply general rules to particular cases, whether health is better served by the general practitioner treating the whole man, or by a specialist treating a special organ, how the relation of the physician to his patient is itself a therapeutic factor, and underlies the effectiveness of his skill in all other respects. To what extent mind and body interact both in the origin and in the cure of disease. These are the problems of medicine concerning which Hippocrates and Galen can converse with Osler and Freud almost as contemporaries. The distinction made in the chapter on art between the simply productive and the cooperative arts associates medicine with agriculture and teaching, and separates these arts, which merely help a natural result to come about, from the arts which produce an effect that would never occur without the work of the artist. Plants grow and reproduce without the help of farmers. The mind can discover some truth without the aid of teachers. Animals and men can preserve and regain their health without the care of physicians. But without shoemakers or house builders, shoes and houses would not be produced. The art of medicine does not produce health in the sense in which the shoemaker produces a shoe, or the sculptor a statue. These other arts imitate nature by embodying natural forms of functions in materials wherein they do not naturally arise. An art like medicine seems to imitate nature by cooperating with natural processes. It follows the course of nature itself, and by working with it, enables the natural result to eventuate more surely than it might if art had no attempt to overcome the factors of chance. Socrates expresses this understanding of the physician's art when he uses the metaphor of midwifery to characterize his own method of teaching, as it is the mother who labors and gives birth, so it is the student who is primarily active in the process of learning. The teacher, like the midwife, merely assists in a natural process, which might be more painful and might possibly fail without such help. The teacher, writes Aquinas, only brings exterior help, as does the physician who heals, just as the interior nature is the principal cause of the healing, so the interior light of the intellect is the principal cause of knowledge. Health, he continues, is caused in a sick man sometimes by an exterior principle, namely by the medical art, sometimes by an interior principle, as when a man is healed by the force of nature. Just as nature heals a man by alteration, digestion, rejection of the matter that caused the sickness, so does art. The exterior principle art acts not as a primary agent, but as helping the primary agent, which is the interior principle, and by furnishing it with instruments and assistants, of which the interior principle makes a use in producing the effect. Thus the physician strengthens nature and employs food and medicine, of which nature makes use for the intended end. The subordination of the medical art to nature seems to be the keystone of the whole structure of Hippocratic medicine. Hippocratic medicine. It is implied in the emphasis which Hippocrates placed on the control of the patient's regimen, especially the elements of his diet, the exercise of his body, and the general circumstances of his life. Even in the treatment of acute diseases, Hippocrates looks to the regimen first, prescribing changes or special articles of diet. Medicines or drugs perform an auxiliary function. Surgery is always a last resort, to be used primarily in the treatment of injuries, and not to be employed in diseases which will yield to a course of regimen and medication. There is an element of violence in surgery which puts it last among the means of an art which should work by cooperating with nature rather than by operating on it. And among medicines, those are preferable which, like Pitisin, a special preparation of barley water, derive their efficacy from properties similar to those of normal nutriment. According to Hippocrates, the control of regimen is not only the primary factor in therapy, but also the original principle of medicine. In the treatise on ancient medicine, he points out that the art of medicine would not have been invented at first, nor would it have been made the subject of investigation, for there would have been no need for it, if when men are indisposed, the same food and other articles of regimen which they eat and drink when in good health were proper for them, and if no other were preferable to these. Preferable to these. Period. The diet and the food which people in health now use would not have been discovered, provided it suited man to eat and drink in like manner as the ox, the horse, and all other animals. What other object, then, has he in view who is called a physician, and is admitted to be a practitioner of the art, who found out the regimen and diet befitting the sick, than he who originally found out and prepared for all mankind that kind of food which we all now use, in place of the former savage and brutish mode of living? The same conception of medicine's relation to nature seems to be fundamental in Galen's thought. He attributes to Hippocrates his own reformulation of the insight that the art of healing consists in imitating the health-giving and healing powers of nature itself. The medical doctrines which he criticizes were based on the atomism of Epicurus. They regarded the body as a complex piece of machinery. When it gets out of order, it needs a mechanic and mechanical remedies to fix it. On the contrary, it seems to him, the living body is an organic unity, not an aggregation of atoms or a system of interlocking parts. Nature is not posterior to the corpuscles, but a long way prior to them, Galen writes. Therefore, it is nature which puts together the bodies, both of plants and animals, and this she does by virtue of certain faculties which she possesses, these being on the one hand attractive and assimilative of what is appropriate, and on the other expulsive of what is foreign. Further, she skillfully molds everything during the stage of genesis, and she also provides for the creatures after birth, employing here other faculties again. Nature, according to Galen, works not by the external impact of part upon part, but by its faculties or powers for the performance of natural functions and the production of natural effects. Galen's polemic against the mechanists thus leads him to reverse the usual statement. Where Hippocrates looks upon nature as the model for art to follow, Galen calls nature the artist, in order to set his view in sharp contrast to all mechanical conceptions. Instead of admiring nature's artistic skill, he declares, they even go so far as to scoff and maintain that things have been made by nature for no purpose. Nature, Galen holds, produces effects according to its powers and in conformity to its needs. It seems to work with intelligence and for an end, not blindly and by chance. The true art of medicine, therefore, borrows its methods from nature's art. The conception of nature as an artist may be taken metaphorically or literally, but the insight controlling the practice of medicine remains the same. The physician is a servant, not a master of nature. Aristotle's doctrine of final causes, summarized in the maxim Galen so often repeats, that nothing is done by nature in vain, furnishes a principle for physiological research as well as the rules of medical art. Whether because of faulty observation on his part or because of a failure to apply his own principle, Galen leaves to Harvey one of the great discoveries which can be credited to close attention to final causes. Always observant of the relation between structure and function, always questioning the purpose which bodily organs serve, Harvey establishes the fact that the blood circulates and finds therein the reason for the structure of the heart, its emotions, and its relation to the lungs. It may also be possible for a principle to be carried to excess. Montaigne, for example, expresses his distrust of medical theory and the physician's remedies by an unqualified trust in nature's own resourcefulness. Drugs, especially purgatives, do violence to nature. Men disturb and irritate the disease by contrary oppositions. It must be the way of living that must gently dissolve and bring it to an end. The violent grippings and contests betwixt the drug and the disease are ever to our loss, since the combat is fought within ourselves, and that the drug is an assistant not to be trusted, being in its own nature an enemy to our health. and by trouble having only access into our condition. By trouble having only access into our condition. Let it alone a little. The general order of things that takes care of fleas and moles also takes care of men, if they will have the same patience that fleas and moles have, to leave it to itself. Nor is there any need for an art of medicine, when nature can do better by herself. We ought to grant free passage to diseases. I find they stay less with me, who let them alone. And I have lost some, reputed the most tenacious and obstinate, by their own decay, without help and without art, and contrary to its rules. Let us a little permit nature to take her own way. She better understands her own affairs than we. The Hippocratic doctrine seems to occupy a middle ground between the view of nature as an unerring artist and the opposite extreme, which permits all sorts of tampering and tinkering with the machinery of the body. The art of medicine consists in three things, writes Hippocrates: the disease, the patient, and the physician. The physician is the servant of the art, and the patient must combat the disease along with the physician. With regard to diseases, the physician must have two special objects in view: to do good and to do no harm. What else? To do good and to do no harm. This celebrated summary indicates the two kinds of knowledge which the physician should possess. He should know about disease in general, so that he can classify diseases according to their special causes, their symptoms, and the typical course each seems to take. Such knowledge underlies the doctor's diagnosis of the patient's malady. That in turn determines his prognosis of the stages through which the illness will run, from its onset through various crises. Or turning points to its sequelae or consequences. Upon the accuracy of his diagnosis and the certainty of his prognosis may depend the effectiveness of any remedy the physician prescribes in the individual case. But individual cases are seldom completely alike. The physician must therefore know the patient as an individual and all the relevant circumstances of his life, as well as the particular characteristics of this instance of the disease. Even though its general characteristic are familiar to him from much experience in the treatment of similar cases, the Book of Prognostics and the Treatise of the Epidemics in the Hippocratic collection seem to combine both these kinds of knowledge. They enumerate the symptoms by which diseases can be recognized and their future foretold. They also set forth individual case histories from which such generalizations can be drawn. The practice of medicine thus appears to require more than scientific knowledge of health and disease in general, and more than general rules of art. It requires the sort of experience which can be gained only from actual practice. Without prudence born of experience, general rules can be misapplied, for no general rule, in medicine as in law, fits all cases alike. The most famous of Hippocratic aphorisms conveys a sense of the hazards of medical practice. Life is short, and art long, the crisis fleeting, experiment perilous, and decision difficult. The physician must not only be prepared to do what is right himself, but also to make the patient, the attendants, and the externals cooperate. To persuade the patient to cooperate is the first maxim governing the physician's relation to his patient. Plato contrasts the right and wrong relation between doctor and patient by comparing the practice of the physicians who treated slaves and those who treated free men. The slave doctor, he says, prescribes what mere experience suggests, as if he had exact knowledge, and when he has given his orders, like a tyrant, he rushes off with equal assurance. To some other servant who is ill. But the other doctor, who is a freeman, attends and practices upon freemen, and he carries his inquiries far back and goes into the nature of the disorder. He enters into discourse with the patient and with his friends, and is at once getting information from the sick man and also instructing him as far as he is able, and he will not prescribe for him until he has first convinced him. At last, when he has brought the patient more and more under his persuasive influences and set him on the road to health, he attempts to effect a cure. In the treatment of mental diseases, as Freud points out, the proper development and management of the relationship between patient and physician is itself a major factor in psychotherapy. It presupposes a profound interest for psychological incidents, as well as personal sympathy for the patient. He writes, it requires the full consent and the attention of the patients, but above all, their confidence, for the analysis regularly leads to the inmost and most secretly guarded psychic processes. Since fears, anxieties, or other temperamental dispositions on the part of the patient may affect the course of an organic ailment, the patient's confidence in the physician, and even more generally his emotional response to the physician's character, play an important role in the successful treatment of the bodily ills as well as of mental or functional disorders. Hippocrates recommends that the physician cultivate prognosis, not only for the guidance of his own actions, but also for the sake of the patient. By foreseeing and foretelling in the presence of the sick, the present, the past, and the future, and explaining the omissions which patients have been guilty of, he will be the more readily believed to to be acquainted with the circumstances of the sick, so that men will have confidence to entrust themselves to such a physician. The relation of physician and patient raises a question about the organization of the practice of medicine, to which opposite answers have been given in both ancient and modern times. Herodotus reports a high degree of medical specialization in Egypt. Medicine is practiced among them on a plan of separation, he writes. Each physician treats a single disorder and no more. Thus the country swarms the medical practitioners, some undertaking to cure diseases of the eye, others of the hand, others again of the teeth, others of the intestines, and some those which are not local. The fact that the next paragraph begins a discussion of funerals can hardly be taken as revealing the attitude of Herodotus towards specialization, though his comment on the Egyptian practice does imply a contrast to Greek medicine. One sentence in the Hippocratic Oath, "I will not cut persons laboring under the stone, but will leave this to be done by men who are practitioners of this work," indicates some division of labor in the organization of Greek medicine. But apart from the special task and skills of surgery, the Hippocratic conception of the physician's work favors the practice of general medicine rather than specialization. The man, not the disease, is to be treated, and to treat him well, the physician must examine the man as a whole, not merely the organ or bodily part in which the disorder seems to be located. The Hippocratic formula for getting a case history calls for an inquiry into the background of the individual's life, the anecdotes, his occupation, his temperament, the patient's habits, regimen, and pursuits, his conversation, manners, taciturnity, thoughts, sleep, or absence of sleep, and sometimes his dreams, what they are and when they occur, his picking and scratching, his tears. From these, as well as from the symptoms, which, says Hippocrates, we must form our judgment. The defense of general practice against specialization is part of Galen's argument with his adversaries. Treatment of the disordered part, as if it could be isolated from the living unity of the whole man, is, to Galen, one of the deplorable consequences in medical practice of atomism or mechanism in medical theory. This issue is argued again and again in the history of medicine, with each side pressing the advantages in its favor. Montaigne, for example, states the case for the specialist by analogy with the advantages of specialization in other arts. As we have doublet and breeches makers, distinct trades, to clothe us, and are so much the better fitted, seeing that each of them meddles only with his own business, and has less to trouble his head with than the tailor, who undertakes them all. And as in matter of diet, great persons for their better convenience have cooks for the different offices, so also as to the cure of our maladies. With Freud and the development of a greater awareness of the psychological origin of many bodily disorders, a new factor enters into the argument. It tends to favor the general practitioner, who from his acquaintance with the patient as a person may be better able than the specialist to detect hidden psychological causes. The conception of disease is usually determined by the conception of health. The abnormality is judged and measured as a deviation from the norm. Hippocrates uses the outward appearance of man in a healthy condition as the standard for discerning the visible signs of illness. The physician, he says, should observe, ... first the countenance of the patient. If it be like those of persons in health, and more so, if like itself, for this is the best of all. First the countenance of the patient. If it be like those of persons in health, and more so, if like itself, for this is the best of all. Whereas the most opposite of it is the worst. He should also take note when he finds the patient reclining in a posture which resembles the normal disposition of the healthy body. To find the whole body lying in a relaxed state is a more favorable sign than to find him upon his back, with the hands, neck, and legs extended. The history of medicine, especially on the side of its science and theory, is not so much with regard to its art and practice, if not so much with regard to its art and practice, can be told in terms of refinements in the classification of diseases and progressive discovery of their specific causes, both internal and external, predisposing and exciting. But the analysis of diseases according to their etiology, and by reference to the typical picture of the disease process, leaves unanswered the general question about the nature of disease as a loss of health. Apart from its causes and its symptoms, its modes and its patterns, what is disease? This is the question of major speculative interest in the tradition of the great books. The answers given have a certain uniformity in spite of the varying terms in which they are expressed. The humoral hypotheses of ancient medical theory, for example, conceives health as a condition of the body in which the physiological elements are in a proper proportion or balance, and in which the various parts or powers function harmoniously with one another. As health is harmony or good order in the body, so disease consists in imbalance and disharmony. An excess or defect with the consequent disproportion of the elements, or the disorder of conflicting bodily processes. In the Timaeus, Plato first states this theory in terms of the four physical elements. There are four natures out of which the body is compacted: earth and fire and water and air. And the unnatural excess or defect of these, or the change of any of them from its own natural place into another, produces disorders and diseases. He then considers the diseases which result from excess or defect of one or another of the four humors: blood, phlegm, black and yellow bile. The humoral hypothesis, which Hippocrates and Galen share with Plato and Aristotle, undergoes many transformations in the history of medicine. The four elements or humors are replaced by other physiological factors, such as the hormones or internal secretions on the elements of modern biochemistry. But constant throughout these changing formulations is the conception of health as an equilibrium, and of disease as its loss through disorder and disproportion. This broad conception of health and disease seems to apply to mental as well as bodily ills. There is not only a basic continuity between Plato's and Freud's discussion of the bodily origin of mental disorders and the psychic origin of physical ailments, but the Freudian emphasis upon conflict and disintegration in the neurotic character. Milder forms of the schizophrenia or split personality, which characterizes insanity, also appeals to harmony as the principle of health. The language of modern psychiatry, which refers to the integrated personality, or the well-balanced and adjusted individual, defines the norm of the ideal of mental health. The various kinds and degrees of mental disorder, especially those which seem to be entirely functional rather than organic, represent abnormalities which, though they differ in cause, symptom, and tendency, have in common some excess or defect in the psychic structure, or some unresolved conflict in the nature of man. Freud's psychoanalytic method in the treatment of mental ills places psychotherapy in the main tradition of medical practice, for in addition to insisting that the patient shall help to cure himself, it is directed toward the resolution of conflict, restoring the harmony which is health. Outline of topics: the profession of medicine, its aims and obligations, the relation of physician to patient, the place of the physician in society. 2. The art of medicine. 3. The practice of medicine. 4. The concepts of health, normal balance, or harmony. 5. The theory of disease. 6. Mental disease or disorder, its causes and cure. 7. The historical record on disease and its treatment. Epidemics, plagues, pestilences. Here we have all the references, and I can finally look them up. Let's try it. Let's see what Virgil has to say in the Aeneid, Book 7, which I believe is Virgil. It's one of the earliest written things. Here we go. Number 13. Book 7, 391 to 397. Specifically 364B, is that within? So the page numbers, right? That can't be right. It doesn't go up that high. Oh, I see. It's an epic poem, so you have to go look up Book 7, verse 397. The Poems of Virgil, the Aeneid, 101. Book 7, 391, 397. For thee the pliant wand thee celebrates, and dances, trims the sacred lock for thee. The rumor flies, and lo, the matrons all, a sudden frenzy kindling in their breasts. The self-same passion, at one moment, drives to seek new dwellings. They have left their homes, bared necks and tresses to the breeze, but some with quivering shrieks fill heaven and clad in skins, bear wands of vine wood. Midmost, all aglow, herself uplifts a blazing pine, and chants the marriage song of Turnus and her child, rolling a bloodshot eye, and sudden shouts fiercely, Ho, Latian mothers, wheresoever, hearken, if any kindness yet survive for poor Amata in your loving hearts, pricks your compunction for a mother's right. Loose from your locks the wreaths, take up with me the revel. So, mid forest depths, amid the wild beasts, lonely covert, far and wide, with Bacchic goad, Alecto drives the queen. When the first rage seemed whetted to her will, Latinus's counsel to confusion turned, and all his house forthwith on murky wing floats the grand goddess to the city walls, on the bold Rutul, which fair Danae for her Acresian settlers, as folk tell, found it borne shoreward by the furious south. I don't see anything about medicine in here. 391. 364B. Is that the page? I don't think it goes up that high. Oh, I was reading the wrong poem. Oh no, I went to the wrong book. I was looking at book 7. Not in book 12. All right, let's try that again. Which is weird because they had verse 391 specifically marked in book 7, so I was like, oh, here I am, right? Okay, here we go. 390. And now Iapis, son of Iasus, dear born all to Phobos draws anigh, whom erst Apollo by keen love subdued, with his own arts and gifts, prophetic lore, the lyre and arrows swift, was fain to bless. He, to protract his sire's appointed span, now nigh to death, the power of herbs to know, the healer's skill, chose rather, and to ply, a silent art, inglorious, chafing sore, propped on his mighty spear, mid a vast throng of warriors, with Iolaus, grieving nigh, untroubled by their tears, Aeneas stood, the aged sire, his garb Paeonian wise. Paeonian wise flung back. Okay, that's it. So 364B is just saying, like, what page, I guess. Those are the verses. Different styles of reference notation for different styles of work. But there you have it. Some lines about the physician from Virgil. Lots of stuff in All's Well That Ends Well. Act 1, Scene 1. Scene 3. Act 2, Scene 1. Scene 3. And then in Macbeth, Act 4, Scene 3. God, this must take so much work. Holy crap. To go through all these different books and mark each section where any of 102 great ideas is being talked about. I mean, you could use a computer nowadays to do that pretty quick. Probably. Language model. AI. But I doubt it would do as good a job anytime soon, at least. Maybe not. Maybe we're in a computer. Great ideas, a Centopicon, Man to World. I love these books. The guy said no musty smell, but I mean, you can't have a book really be 73 years old and not smell a little bit. But they are in good condition. I really lucked out finding this particular offer. There's like no damage on anything. It's crazy. I mean, this is a little fucked up. But this probably came like that out of the factory. I always imagined there'd be more volumes. It's actually not a very large set. Maybe the second edition had more volumes, probably, because the print was bigger. But I don't mind the compact, small print. I mean, this to me is like perfection. Thomas Aquinas, Tacitus, Plutarch, Plato, Montaigne, Shakespeare, Milton, Gibbon, Goethe, Melville, Dostoevsky, Tolstoy, Augustine. definitely agree with Hippocrates and the idea of food being your medicine and only using surgery as a last result, respecting what organs are there to do in the body, not just removing them. That's why I sell this stuff. Dr. Joel Wallach discovered that there's 90 essential nutrients, the deprivation of which, any one of which, will cause a nutritional deficiency disease. He also talks about not stepping on the landmines as being another big part to avoid chronic disease. Fried foods, carcinogenic things with free radicals that will mess up your DNA and cause cancer, but you can consume things with a high ORAC score, which stands for, I totally forget. Basically, it protects your molecules of your DNA or whatever against free radicals. So you can prevent disease. You can cure disease. Some things are birth defects, can't be cured. But that can be prevented with proper nutrition in the mother. He doesn't believe in the concept of diseases being unavoidably passed through your genetics and uncurable, only able to manage the symptoms with medication, which makes a lot of money if you can sell drugs like that. But it would be better to cure the disease for the patient. It would be the right thing to do. Not to exploit them, but I don't think medical doctors do it knowingly. They aren't taught what is the truth in medical school. But that might change, at least in the United States. Now that RFK's in there, Food and Drug Administration will no longer stop Youngevity from making true claims about being able to cure disease. And that will help a lot of people. I think there should be a universal, talk about universal income, there should be a government program where people get free nutritional supplements from Youngevity or some similar company that's doing the same, following the same science. Because the nutrients aren't in the food. The minerals aren't in the food anymore. Evidently. Dr. Joel Wallach has made more women pregnant than King Solomon. Think about that. And he's out there still doing it at the age of 86 or something. Not personally, but through prescribing his supplements to couples that can't conceive. Infertility is a nutritional disorder. It's a fact. It's an indisputable fact.